This is the Canon R50, and I think it's a fantastic camera. It shoots great photographs, does excellent video, and I'm really happy with mine. So if you're considering the purchase of a camera, I would endorse the Canon R50. But having used the R50 for a while, there are some things about it that, well, I wish were different. And there's this, which makes me think, Canon, what are you doing? And so, knowing that, maybe I should have purchased the R10. So I want to tell you about the R50, and I want to talk about my selection process that led me to the R50, and why I think this is a great choice for a whole lot of people. And maybe after going through this process, you'll be guided as to what camera is best for you. I'm going to talk about some of the things about the R50 that I don't see too many people talking about that have caused me to have some minor doubts as to whether or not this is the camera I should have purchased, or if I should have spent a little bit more and gone up to the R10. Well, but maybe not. So let's start at the beginning. I'm assuming you're here because you're interested in selecting a camera. And you've probably already decided that you want a camera, not a phone. Although today's phones can take some really good-looking pictures and some excellent video. But a phone isn't going to give you the ease of creative control that a real camera will. And a phone probably isn't going to give you the same quality of results as a real camera with a big lens and a big sensor. I think of a phone as a multi-purpose device like a Swiss Army knife, and the Swiss Army knife has a screwdriver blade in it that works pretty well for tightening up the occasional screw. But if I have a lot of work to do, I'm going to grab a real screwdriver. It's just a purpose-made tool that makes things easier and works better. So you've decided that you want a camera, not a phone. And there's a bunch of cameras in the market from different manufacturers such as Fuji and Nikon, Leica, Sony, Canon. And looking at all of these manufacturers, they all make great products. And I would think that any decent camera is going to perform very well in a controlled situation. For example, a photo studio where you have controlled lighting. I would expect to get great results with any decent camera. But these brands start to get separated out when you get into more challenging photo situations in the real world. When you are trying to take photographs or video in low light situations, or high contrast situations such as backlit scenes, or complicated scenes where the camera has to figure out what is it that I should be focusing on here, or situations where there's unusual color balance, such as artificial lighting of a band on stage. In all of those scenarios, the processing inside of the camera has to work real hard to try to figure out how to best render that image. Depending upon the situation, each brand has its day. There may be a particular scene where the Fuji or the Nikon produces the best looking image. But in my opinion, most of the time, Sony and Canon tend to do the best job of processing the image and yielding a great result. And this is reflected in the fact that most professionals and most advanced amateurs, you'll see them carrying cameras by either Sony or Canon. And in my opinion, I think that Sony leads a little bit when it comes to producing a technically best proper image. But having said that, I think that Canon's color science tends to look more pleasing more of the time. Now, I think that these two brands are pretty much neck and neck. I think they're both really good. I'd be happy with either one of them. But I lean personally a little bit on the Canon side. I prefer the Canon look a little bit. And so, admittedly, I'm a little bit of a Canon fanboy. And I also already have some Canon accessories and lenses, which certainly sways my decision because that's expensive and I'd rather than have to replace everything. And so this gets me looking at Canon cameras and which Canon camera would be best for me. And I'm going to be looking at the standard mirrorless line of cameras, which is the Canon R series. Now, generally speaking, the smaller the number in the model, the higher it is in the line. So a Canon R3 is a higher level, more expensive, more professional grade camera than a Canon R100. And of course, I would love to have an R3 system, but an R3 with 3 or 4 nice professional lenses with it, I could spend upwards of $10,000 for, and that's just way outside of my budget. So that gets me to looking at the bottom end of the line and seeing which cameras offer me the features and the performance that I need. So we started looking at the R100, which is the entry-level R series camera from Canon. And I immediately disqualified the R100 because its 4K video is not fully featured, in my opinion. It comes with a crop, and it's limited in terms of frame rate. And so with the crop, it means that it's not using the entire sensor, and the image is going to look a little bit zoomed in. And so that's just a compromise I don't want to do. So the R100 just isn't going to do it for me. So then I look at the R50. And this was the camera that I chose because it checked off all my boxes. It has great 4K video, does great photography. It works really well, and I like it a lot. I'm very happy with this purchase. And also, R50 can be a direct PC webcam, which the other Canon cameras cannot do currently. There might be a firmware update that addresses that at some point, but currently that's the status as I understand it. And I think that's a big plus for the R50. So if you're looking for a Canon camera, I think the R50 is a great choice for a lot of people. But there are some things about this camera that I wish were different. And those things are, one, it's small. It is very compact and lightweight. Now that's a plus because if you're carrying a camera around on vacation, it's nice to have one that isn't super large and bulky and heavy. It doesn't require a very big camera bag. And it's comfortable and easy to use, so that's all good. But it is pretty small, and so you're kind of getting your hands around it like so. Whereas if the body was a little bit bigger, you'd get a more comfortable grip on the camera. So if I was going to be using the camera in a handheld situation for long periods of time, like I was commonly doing wedding photography, where I was walking around all day with a camera, or maybe concert photography, same situation, where I have the camera in my hands for a long period of time, I'd prefer to have a camera that had a little bit larger body to it and a more comfortable grip. I don't consider this to be a major problem for me, especially in my case where most of the time I use the camera on a tripod. And speaking of that, the memory and the battery on this camera are on the very bottom plate here, and the door is right there. And so if you want to swap out the battery or the memory card, you have to open up this door, and this door is pretty close to where the tripod mount of the camera is. And so that means that if the camera is mounted on a tripod and you need to swap out a battery or the memory card, well, chances are you're probably going to have to remove the camera off of the tripod to get access to those things. And that's a minor inconvenience because you have to take the camera down, do your swap, put the camera back up, get everything repositioned. It would be nice if you could swap out the memory card or the battery without disturbing the tripod mount. Now, if you move up a line in the camera to the R10 has the larger body, which is easier to grip, and because it has a little bit larger body, they moved the battery and memory card over to the side more, so they're accessible even when the unit's already mounted up on a tripod. That would be a plus. Then the other issue with the R50 is the hot shoe. This is where you can attach accessories such as flash units. Now, if you need a flash, the camera has one built in. So that's convenient. And so if you're having dinner with a group of friends and you want to take a selfie, get the flash right here, works great. But this is a pretty small little flash. It's not going to have huge reach. It doesn't have the ability to do bounce flash off the ceiling or anything like that. And so if you want to use a more powerful flash or a more capable flash, well, you have to mount one up onto the hot shoe here as an external unit, like you would with any camera. But the problem with the R50 is that Canon changed the hot shoe. And so the older version cameras and the higher cameras up in the lineup, such as the R10 and the R7 and so on, have connector terminals on the bottom of the hot shoe for communicating with these flash units. Not so with the R50. They changed the connector layout so that now there's a row of connector pins in the front of the hot shoe, which provide additional capabilities, but they break backwards compatibility with older accessories. And that's a bit of an issue for me because I've got a very nice Canon flash unit which won't work with this camera. So Canon's answer to those of us with existing speedlights or other accessories that don't work with the R50 hot shoe is the ADE1 adapter. It's just a little adapter that looks like this, which has the traditional hot shoe contacts on the top and the new style contacts on the bottom. And so we just simply take the ADE1 and you attach it to the camera like so, lock it down, and then with this adapter on the R50 you have your traditional hot shoe contacts, which will work with your existing prior generation speedlights or other accessories. Real simple and fairly inexpensive. The only problem is that it's not available. It's really hard to find. All of the major camera resellers that I've investigated nationwide are out of stock with the ADE1. Now, hopefully Canon rectifies that situation and makes this part available more regularly. But it's been out of stock for months. And so if you get a R50, you might have a hard time finding this adapter that allows you to use your existing speedlight. Canon offers an existing speedlight, the EL5, which is compatible with this camera, but I believe that is the only product at the moment that is. And that's a fairly expensive speedlight. So if you're going to do serious flash photography with a Canon R50, well, be aware of that. Now, this is of course rectified if you step up the line and go to the Canon R10, which has the traditional contacts in its hot shoe. So if flash photography is a thing for you, and you need to use a powerful external flash unit, stepping up to the Canon R10 might be a good choice. So because of those minor things, that might push me to consider the Canon R10. Now the Canon R10 is about another $250. And so for me, that's a tough call as to whether or not those minor inconveniences are worth that much more money. But the R10 is a little bit larger body that you can get your hands around nicely. It offers the ability to access the memory card and the battery without removing the camera off of the tripod. And the hot shoe in the R10 retains the traditional pins on it that will work with older speedlights and accessories. And so that might be compelling for some people. Aside from that, for me, I don't see any other big compelling reasons to go up to the R10. I don't see that it offers superior video or photo quality. Just those convenience features are better in the R10. Now you might ask, well, how about jumping up to the R7? Well, the R7 is about $500 more than the R10. And so that's getting to be a pretty big jump in price. And the R7 is a single-digit model number, like the R3, R5, R7. And those single-digit numbers imply that this is part of Canon's professional series line. And the professional cameras are going to be bigger, heavier, more rugged. They have some water sealing, so if you're outside and you get into a small drizzle, that moisture is probably not going to be a problem for you. The R7 also gives you dual card slots, so you can record to 2 memory cards at once. And that's important if you're a professional photographer, because if you do an important photo shoot and then you get back and discover that your memory card is corrupted, well, you've got a backup and you don't lose your work, and that could be critically important. The R7 also has faster internal processing that would let you do longer bursts of photos and a bit more capability, but it's a pretty good jump in price, and so for me, I don't need those features. As you go up beyond the R7, now we're getting into the true professional line of Canon cameras, such as the R3, the R5, the R6, and these are fantastic cameras, and they are full frame cameras, meaning the internal sensor is full frame. It's bigger than it is in these enthusiast cameras, which are APS-C sized, which gathers a bit more light, usually gives the camera more capability, but it means that you need to use lenses that are designed for a full frame sensor. Now, the Canon lenses will mechanically mount on all of their cameras, and so you could use the professional lenses designed for a full-frame sensor on an enthusiast level camera like the R50, and they'd work just fine. They'd work great. But it doesn't go the other way. The lenses that are designed for cameras such as the R100, the R50, the R10, those are APS-C style lenses, and even though they would physically mount onto one of the professional series cameras like the R3 or R5, they wouldn't be designed to produce an image across that entirely large sensor. So what you would get with the corners of your photo would probably not be rendered quite as well. Or in an extreme case, you would get a circle of a photo in the middle of the frame, and the edges would be black because that lens wouldn't be able to cover the entire size of that larger sensor. And of course, the professional lenses designed for full-frame cameras are bigger, heavier, and a lot more costly than the lenses that are used with the Canon R50, R10 series cameras. So that's a quick overview of the things that I find limiting with the Canon R50. Like I said earlier, I think it's a terrific camera. I'm really happy with my purchase, and it's worked very, very well for me. Well, I hope hearing about my selection process and why I chose the Canon R50 was helpful to you. And if the limitations that I mentioned about the R50 would be a problem for you, well, maybe you should consider the R10. And if you're interested in learning more about any of these cameras that I've talked about, I'll put links down below the video where you can check them out and see for yourself. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope to catch you again soon on another upcoming video.